My mother tried to reconnect just to get me to fund my brother's wedding. So I evicted her from the house I inherited, and what followed destroyed their fantasy. My name is Evan. I'm 42 years old, and I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. If you asked me what it was like growing up in my family, I'd say it was like being the background character in someone else's story. That story belonged to my younger brother, Nate. Nate was born 5 years after me, and from the moment he came into the world wheezing and wrapped in a tangle of tubes from a pediatric ICU, he became the son my mother revolved around. I was old enough to remember the ambulance, the crying, the way Della, our mom, grabbed Nate like a piece of glass that might shatter if anyone breathed too hard. He had childhood asthma. That was it. Not leukemia, not a missing lung, not some tragic terminal diagnosis. But to Della, it may as well have been the end of the world. From that point forward, Nate was treated like royalty, delicate royalty. Wrapped in scarves when it was barely cold, spoon-fed well past toddlerhood, kept out of every sport, field trip, or birthday party that might involve pollen, air conditioning, or running. I, on the other hand, was self-sufficient by necessity. I made my own lunches, walked myself to school, and taught myself how to shave in 8th grade. Della didn't ignore me out of hatred. She ignored me because she didn't see me. I was a supporting character in the Nate show. I remember once in middle school, I broke my arm on the monkey bars. Cried my eyes out on the way to the ER, more from fear than pain. Della handed me a grocery list and asked if I could still hold a pen with my left hand because she needed milk. I don't think she even signed the cast. Our dad, Alan, tried. Quiet, patient man. The kind of guy who'd leave an envelope with a few bucks under my pillow labeled gas money, or slip me a pack of baseball cards on the sly. But he never challenged Della. He balanced her chaos with whispered loyalty and unspoken truths. And part of that balance meant letting her smother Nate, even if it meant I got pushed to the edge. Every birthday, every holiday, every teacher conference, Nate was the star. When I graduated high school, nobody even noticed I was gone until I called from the dorms 3 days later. Della's response: "You didn't tell me when you were leaving." I told myself I wouldn't let it affect me. I tried to pretend I was above it, that I didn't need the same kind of love or attention. But it got to me. It changed me. I learned how to be invisible, how to expect nothing, how to depend on myself and no one else. Nate, for all his coddling, never learned how to do anything on his own. Even as an adult, he lived like someone waiting to be rescued. Always broke, always behind, always with some new hobby or crisis. I left home at 18 and didn't look back. Found work, then better work. Bought my first car. Paid for everything in cash. Della barely noticed. Nate, meanwhile, failed out of community college and was consoled with a weekend trip to the coast. If I was bitter, I kept it quiet. But that bitterness hardened into something deeper. Not anger exactly. Just this cold, steady certainty that I couldn't count on anyone but myself. That was the beginning. The foundation. The part where the story of my family stopped being something I endured and started being something I would eventually dismantle. Brick by brick, piece by piece. Starting with the one person who had always seen me, even if only in secret, my dad. I started noticing it in the way Dad breathed when we talked on the phone. He used to have this steady rhythm, this calm tone like nothing ever fazed him. But then he started pausing mid-sentence, like catching his breath took effort. At first, I thought it was age, or maybe stress. But when I went home for Thanksgiving and saw him ease himself into the chair like his bones were made of glass, I knew it was something more. "You okay?" I asked, casually, like I didn't already know the answer. "Just a little tired," he said with that half-smile he always used when he didn't want to worry me. "Doc says I need to start taking it easy." Taking it easy turned into weekly doctor visits. Then prescriptions. Then an overnight hospital stay that stretched into a week. And through it all, Della kept going to her book clubs and luncheons, like nothing had changed. Nate barely looked up from his video games. By the time they diagnosed him with advanced heart disease, it was too late to reverse much of anything. The arteries were shot. His heart was giving out, slow and quiet. I flew back home the next day, told my manager I was taking emergency leave, and moved into that stuffy guest room with the broken ceiling fan. I became his nurse overnight. I kept track of his meds, talked to doctors, ran to the store for low-sodium everything, cleaned up after his coughing fits. I sat beside his bed, helped him adjust his pillows, rubbed his hands when they got stiff. I did it because no one else would. Della said hospitals made her anxious. Nate had a new girlfriend and was too emotionally sensitive to be around illness. "I'm sorry it's just you," Dad said one night, barely whispering. I shook my head. "You don't need to say that." "No," he insisted. "I should have done better. Should have stood up for you more." His hand tightened weakly around mine. He was thinner than I'd ever seen him. His skin hung loose, like his body had shrunk under the weight of years. "You were the only one who ever looked out for me," I said, voice cracking. even if it was just in quiet ways. He nodded. You always deserved more. I was there the night he died. Not Della. Not Nate. Just me, and an old family friend named Carl who came by to sit with us in the evenings. Dad opened his eyes, smiled faintly, and said, You turned out good, son. That was the last thing he ever said. When the monitor flatlined, I didn't cry. I just sat there, holding his hand, listening to the silence. We had him cremated, like he wanted. I handled every bit of the paperwork. Della showed up late to the service in a bright lavender dress. Nate forgot to bring the eulogy he'd promised to write. That night, as I packed up his things, I found a note he'd left in his sock drawer. Everything I have is yours. Thank you for being the man I couldn't always be. I folded the note, placed it in my wallet, and sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling both lighter and heavier than I'd ever felt before. It was the first time I felt truly seen, and it came at the exact moment I was about to lose the only person who ever really saw me. The lawyer's office smelled like dust and printer toner. The kind of place where everything felt beige, the furniture, the walls, even the daylight leaking through the blinds. I sat at the end of a long table, hands folded in my lap, already knowing what was coming. Not because Dad told me directly, but because I had seen the way he looked at me those final weeks. The way he held my hand, like passing something invisible but heavy. Della sat across from me, purse in her lap like she was waiting for a sales pitch. Nate slouched beside her, arms crossed, earbuds hanging around his neck like a necklace. Neither of them had asked to read the obituary. Neither offered to help plan the service. But both showed up on time for the will reading. Mr. Alan Prescott, the lawyer began, being of sound mind, issued this updated last will and testament 6 months prior to his passing. The words rolled out in that dry, lawyer cadence, all clauses and legalese. But one phrase made the air shift. And bequeaths all physical property, financial assets, real estate holdings, and pension benefits solely to his eldest son, Evan Prescott. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just kept looking straight ahead, the lawyer's voice now background noise to the sudden spike in tension across the room. What? Della's voice cracked the silence. There must be a mistake, Nate said, half laughing. That can't be right. It's correct, the lawyer replied, flipping to the notarized page. Everything, home, savings, stocks, was transferred into Mr. Evan Prescott's name per Alan's request. He was very clear. You're telling me, Della snapped, that I get nothing? His wife of 44 years. You were listed, but only for sentimental items. A few letters. A family photo album. No financial assets. Nate pushed back from the table. This is bullshit. He wouldn't do this. Evan must have manipulated him or something. I finally looked at them. Calm. Steady. The way Dad always was. He did it because he knew, I said. He knew who was there. And who wasn't. You think this makes you better than us? Nate's voice was rising. You think money changes what this family is? No, I said. It just proves what it always was. Della tried to play the guilt card for weeks after that. Calling, crying, saying she didn't understand why Alan would do this to her. Nate sent texts filled with expletives and insults, claiming I had brainwashed Dad. I ignored every message. After the third week, I changed my number. I didn't want to be cruel. I just wanted to be done. I had spent a lifetime earning nothing and giving everything. If Dad's final act was a reckoning, then I wasn't going to waste it trying to make the ungrateful feel comfortable. He gave me peace, and I wasn't giving it back. It had been almost 4 years since the funeral. By then, my life looked completely different. I'd gotten married to Rachel, a teacher I met through a friend in Portland, and we'd moved overseas for her work with an international school. We had a daughter, Sophia, with Rachel's smile in my eyes. She was 2 and already bossing us around with sticky fingers and a serious love of peanut butter. I hadn't spoken to Della or Nate since cutting them off. No birthday cards. No emails. Nothing. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe they'd accepted the silence as the new reality. Then one morning, I opened the door to our apartment in Prague and nearly dropped my coffee. Hi, Evan, Della said, clutching a floral print travel bag and a grocery store tote with a pharmacy logo on it. I froze. What are you doing here? She looked thinner, older. Her makeup was uneven, and her voice had this trembling edge I didn't recognize. I needed to see you. I've been thinking about everything, about how I treated you. I didn't say anything. I just stared, trying to figure out how a 71-year-old woman who hadn't spoken to me in 4 years had found her way to my front door on another continent. Rachel stepped in behind me, confused. Whose? My mother, I said flatly. Uninvited. We let her in, because we're not monsters. She sat on our couch like she was visiting a stranger's house, back straight, legs crossed, hands folded like a church lady. Sophia toddled out, looked at her, and then immediately hid behind Rachel's leg. She's beautiful, Della said, voice cracking. She looks like you did. When you were little. I didn't respond. I didn't know what this was yet, guilt, or something worse. Over tea, Della poured out the apology she must have rehearsed 1,000 times. How she regretted not being more present, not loving me the way I deserved. How she was so lost after Dad passed and had let her grief cloud everything. How Nate had taken advantage of her softness. How she wanted to rebuild, be a part of Sophia's life, while there's still time. Part of me wanted to believe her. I mean, people change, right? But another part, the smarter part, stayed quiet and watchful. I told her we could exchange emails. Video calls. Nothing too deep, too soon. She agreed. She even cried when she left. And for a little while, I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, something good might come from this. Then, 2 weeks later, I got the real reason. Della emailed me with a subject line that said, important. I opened it during lunch at work. It started friendly, updates on the weather back home, how Nate was doing better now, how she appreciated our conversation. And then, anyway, I wouldn't ask if it weren't important, but Nate's getting married again this fall. It would mean the world to him, and to me, if you could help out financially. Even just a little. I stared at the screen, heart sinking. There it was. The real reason. Wrapped in flowery words and maternal guilt, but still the same old Della. She hadn't come to rebuild. She'd come to collect. I didn't answer her email right away. I reread it a dozen times over the next 2 days, hoping maybe I'd missed something. Some sincere line buried between the small talk and manipulative ask. But no, it was exactly what I thought it was, a setup. She'd laid the groundwork with fake apologies and soft eyes, hoping it would be enough to loosen the door, just wide enough to slip a request through. And here it was. Nate's second wedding. Apparently, the golden child still couldn't tie his own shoes without a check from someone else. I waited a week before replying. I'm not paying for his wedding, I wrote. I wasn't even invited to the first one. The response came fast. Less than 20 minutes later, my inbox lit up. Evan, please don't be like this, she wrote. It's not just about the money. It's about family. It's about healing. This could bring us all back together. Don't ruin that over old grudges. That's when the call started. First her. Then a couple of aunts I hadn't spoken to in years. Then a message from an uncle I barely remembered, asking me to be the bigger man. Each one said the same thing. Just do it for peace. For the sake of the family. And each time, my stomach turned a little more. Rachel saw the way I clenched my jaw whenever my phone buzzed. You okay? She asked one night as I sat at the kitchen table, rereading a particularly dramatic message from one of my cousins. I nodded, even though I wasn't. They want me to pay for Nate's wedding, I said finally. Even though I haven't seen him in 5 years. Even though he's never met Sophia. Even though they never came to our wedding. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. You're not even invited. I shook my head. Nope. She walked over, put her hand on my shoulder. Then don't even consider it. But part of me had considered it. Not for Nate. Not for Della. But for the idea that maybe, just maybe, helping would finally earn their respect. That maybe they'd finally see me as more than a wallet. And then I remembered all the birthdays they missed. The funeral they half showed up for. The time Della didn't even call after Sophia was born. So I picked up the phone, called my mother directly. I'm not paying, I said as soon as she answered. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm just done rewarding you. She tried again, with stories about how hard Nate's year had been, about how much this wedding meant to him, about how she'd already told people I was contributing. That sounds like your problem, I replied. Not mine. You used to be a good son, she said bitterly. No, I said quietly. I used to be a convenient one. I hung up before she could respond. That night, I sat on the floor with Sophia, stacking blocks and laughing at nothing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not the bigger man, just a better one. The house had been in our family since the early 90s. A 2-story colonial on the edge of Tacoma, white shutters, cracked driveway, rust-colored roof. After Dad passed, it became legally mine, but I let Della stay there rent-free. I didn't want the place sitting empty, and at the time, I still had that last thread of guilt tying me to her. That thread snapped completely after the wedding fiasco. She'd manipulated her way into our lives again, pushed for money, and when I didn't bend, she unleashed the family guilt machine on me like clockwork. After that, I sat down with Rachel and said the words I'd been holding back for years. I want her out of the house. Rachel didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, about time. The eviction notice went out that Monday. 30 days. That was the law, and I gave her every single one of them. I expected the rage. And it came quickly. You ungrateful bastard, she said in a voicemail. This is my home. Your father would be ashamed. Funny, the same father who left it to me. The same one she couldn't be bothered to sit with when he died. Then came the sobs. I'm an old woman, Evan. Where am I supposed to go? This is all I have. You're heartless. And then, when that didn't work, the threats. I'll go to the press. I'll tell everyone what you're doing. Let's see how that looks, Mr. Big Shot. I didn't respond to a single one. Nate chimed in next, blowing up my inbox with a stream of furious texts. You think you're better than us? Dad would never want this. She has nowhere else to go, man. Have some decency. I had plenty of decency. I just didn't have any more patience. A week before the deadline, I stopped by the house. I didn't go inside. Just stood on the curb and watched the lights on in the living room, the TV glow flickering behind the curtains. Same old house. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It never really did. On day 29, she finally moved out. No thank you. No goodbye. Just a U-Haul driven by a friend of a friend and boxes stacked like she'd been forced out at gunpoint. I watched from my car across the street, arms crossed. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Either way, she was gone by nightfall. I changed the locks that evening. Later, I walked through the empty rooms, every corner echoing memories I wasn't sure I believed anymore. The house smelled musty, neglected, like someone had lived in it but hadn't truly cared about it for a long time. There was a pile of unopened mail in the kitchen, most of it junk. One envelope caught my eye, a card, unopened, postmarked from 3 years ago. It was the congratulations card Rachel and I had sent after Sophia was born. She'd never even opened it. I threw it in the trash, locked the door behind me, and walked out. For the first time, it really did feel like mine. I didn't hear anything about Nate's wedding for a while. After the eviction, the family radio went silent. No more guilt trips. No more tantrums. Just quiet. Then, about 2 months later, I got a Facebook message from a cousin I barely knew. Just a single sentence. Did you hear about Nate's wedding disaster? I didn't reply. But of course I went looking. The big, elaborate venue was gone. So was the custom catering, the band, even the open bar. In its place, a small community center hall, potluck-style buffet, and a Bluetooth speaker with a playlist that cut out every time someone got a text. Apparently, the venue had canceled after final payment fell through. And the deposit? Non-refundable. The same deposit Nate was counting on me to cover. Rachel and I sat on the couch one night, scrolling through the pictures someone had tagged me in, not maliciously, just one of those accidental algorithm things. This is sad, she said, wincing at a blurry group photo taken in front of a wrinkled banner that said happily ever after in Comic Sans. I nodded, but I didn't feel smug. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes from being right for too long. The bride, a woman named Jessica I had never met, looked uncomfortable in every photo. Like she'd just found out the dress she picked wasn't returnable. A week later, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. It was her. Hi, Evan, she started awkwardly. I know we've never met, but I think we need to talk. She never mentioned money outright. Just hinted that things were a bit chaotic and that she didn't realize the financial situation until after the wedding. I didn't return the call. Apparently, Della had moved in with Nate and Jessica right after the wedding. Said it was temporary, just until she found a new place. But it didn't take long before her old habits kicked in. She criticized Jessica's cooking, rearranged their living room furniture, and made passive-aggressive comments about how Nate used to date girls who wore dresses more often. According to a different cousin, Della even started calling Jessica's parents to discuss how they were raising their daughter. I got the play-by-play from various family members who had once sided with her, but now treated me like the prophet who saw the apocalypse coming. She's impossible, one uncle muttered at a family barbecue I didn't attend but heard about anyway. I don't know how Nate puts up with her. Spoiler, he didn't. Jessica gave Nate an ultimatum 3 months into their marriage. Either your mom moves out, or I do. Della reacted exactly how I expected, with a full-scale meltdown. Crying, accusing, threatening to disown, both of them. Which made everyone laugh because, let's be honest, she never really owned any part of the responsibility in the first place. She got kicked out the same week. Moved in with another cousin. Lasted 3 weeks before getting asked to leave for emotional terrorism, as the cousin's wife put it on Facebook. Now she was couch surfing. Nate, humiliated, had taken to blaming everyone else. Especially me. It's Evan's fault, he told anyone who would listen. If he hadn't cut us off, none of this would have happened. But that was the thing. The castle had crumbled because it was built on handouts and lies. I just stopped being the one holding up the walls. The email came on a Sunday morning. I was making pancakes with Sophia when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. Subject line, one last request. It was from Della. I didn't open it right away. Just stared at it while Sophia smeared syrup on her pajamas and proudly announced that she flipped the pancake all by herself, even though I'd done all the flipping. I smiled at her and put the phone face down on the counter. It wasn't until later that night, after Sophia was asleep and the house was quiet, that I opened the email. It was long, full of flourishes, full of desperate hope. She wanted to move back into the house. Not because she had nowhere to go, though she made that very clear, but because, according to her, it's time to rebuild what we lost. She wrote about missing family, about growing older and realizing her mistakes. She said she wanted to be part of Sophia's life, to make things right before it was too late. I didn't reply. 2 days later, another message. Shorter this time. Please. I'm tired. I can't keep doing this. You're all I have left. Still, I said nothing. Over the next few weeks, I heard through the grapevine that she'd bounced between 3 different relatives, worn out her welcome at all of them. Apparently, she spent most of her time blaming me for everything. According to her, I was the cold-hearted son who abandoned his family in their hour of need. But here's what she didn't understand. I hadn't abandoned anyone. They had abandoned me a long time ago. When I was 10 and no one came to my science fair. When I was 16 and needed a ride to a college interview, and they said Nate had a dentist appointment. When I buried my father and stood alone at his grave while they argued about who got what from the estate. She thought all she had to do was say sorry, and it would erase decades of absence. That she could re-enter my life under the banner of forgiveness, only to tug at the same strings she'd always pulled. But the strings were gone. Nate's marriage limped along. Jessica stopped showing up to family gatherings. They moved into a smaller apartment, quietly sold off some wedding gifts. Nate started another GoFundMe. I didn't click it. Every now and then I'd get wind of another comment, another complaint. Evan thinks he's too good for us now. Maybe I am. Because while they pointed fingers and spun stories, I was at home reading bedtime stories to Sophia, laughing with Rachel over burnt lasagna, planning trips that didn't include drama or dread. I didn't need closure. I didn't need revenge. I just needed distance. And now I had it. The last time I saw that house, I drove past it with Rachel. The porch had been painted, the yard overgrown, the mailbox leaning to one side. It didn't feel like my childhood anymore. It just looked like a building someone else used to live in. I reached over, took her hand, and said, "Let's go home." And we did.